Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Robert Althuis. Hey, Robert.
Hi there, Kimberly. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yes, I'm excited for what we're going to talk about, but just so people know who you are, I'm going to read your bio.
Do
So,
it.
Robert Althuis is a spiritual philosopher, author, keynote speaker, and founder of Regenerative Real Estate and Holistic Wellness Organization, dedicated to embedding love+truth as the foundational spiritual principles for an awakened humanity. He stands at the intersection of celestial wisdom and real world transformation. A certified medium and with an MBA from Columbia Business School, Robert blends deep esoteric knowledge with pragmatic insight, guiding elite leaders, visionaries, and seekers towards their highest potential. As an author, Alpha Virtuous is Robert's fifth published work, following Never Enoughitis,
Never.
Manifesting Mastery, Enoughitis, right?
That's all right.
Enoughitis, Manifesting Mastery, the Crucible Manifesto, and his fully channeled spiritual manifesto, Love+Truth. Yes, I'm sorry for stumbling over some of those words. I think that was a new word.
Well, it was sort of invited. Yeah, it's kind of a funny story because the book was called Overcoming Myself first. And I used never enoughitis, which is really this disease that we have, right? It's never enough. And so we're always seeking, we're always, seeking something more, as if we can't fill that void inside. And then my publisher at the time said, there's never enough-itis. It's just like, that just resonates, it's a disease that we have. And so that became the title of the book. And the other book that I just released yesterday is Alpha Virtus. Now, virtus is Latin for virtuous. And so that is about the virtuous man. How do we become, as men, virtuous man instead of just economic opportunistic man?
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And we're going to get into that one more.
Absolutely.
So, but the first question I have for you that I have for everyone on the podcast is tell us about you, because I know you didn't start out in this way,
No,
life
no,
this
no,
way.
no.
So how did you start out?
I did. I appreciate it. So I was actually born and raised in Europe, in Holland, in Amsterdam, and I was 21 when I left. I landed here in the beautiful shores of the United States to pursue my American dream. And I climbed up the corporate ladder. I went to night school, and I did quite well. And then I got into business school in New York, and did quite well there. And I got picked up by GE Capital, and I had a flourishing career there. I made it to top 1% at age 34, I believe. And I did what everybody told me to do, what the world tells you to do. Just hustle, just work hard. And I was really good at it. And I was good at out hustling everybody. And so I thrived in that game. That environment was just suited for me. I'm also a very competitive guy. And so that world just enamored me, but I got a little lost in the power and the money and all those things. And when the financial crisis hit, I actually left GE. I wound down my business because the regulators came in, and I bought out a little what they called an orphan asset from GE, and that's how I got into business for myself. And I was in the business of building airports and airport infrastructure around the world. And I built up a big business in Latin America at the time. This was around 2009. And I worked with big pension fund investors and private equity firms and all the sort of people that wear very fancy ties. And I used to wear them too. And in 2015, I sold most of that business, and I was in my early 40s. I reached this proverbial mountain peak where the world tells you, when you get there, I had the beautiful oceanfront community home, and I had the perfect family and the beautiful wife and the toys and the cars and money in the bank. And I had a successful business that I just sold. And I felt completely empty. I was completely disillusioned. Now, I was at the highest echelons of business, and that's a gnarly place. I swam with the sharks, and I had to become a shark myself to survive in that world. And slowly but surely along the way, I sold my soul. Sold my soul to the system, to money, to power. I got lost in women and all the other stuff. The typical men that we applaud from the outside, but when you look actually, when you pull the veil back, it's actually not such a pretty picture, right? I was a very wounded man, I had a big wound, a father wound. I really wanted him to be proud of me, and he was this very stoic man that wasn't very good at expressing himself. And so I was always just seeking, I just got to go a little bit further. I got to make a little bit more money. I got to be a little bit more successful. And when I get there, then I'll be happy. And I wasn't. And what really happened on my flight back after I sold the business, I had a profound spiritual awakening. And at the time, I had no idea what happened. But my crown chakra opened up. I had claircognizance come online, which is clear knowing, and clairsentience. I started feeling a lot of energy, and I really didn't know what it was. I was very confused by it. And I even tried to get back in the business because I was sort of lost in this new world that opened up. And I was like, well, maybe I just need to make more money. Maybe it's just not enough. That's why I'm not happy, right? And that didn't work anymore. The old recipe sort of had worn out. I exhausted my ability to find sort of the joy and happiness in what we seek in the outside world. And now the universe was guiding me into my inner world. And this became a profound sort of a spiritual awakening process that unfolded over several years. And I started studying all the esoteric wisdom traditions, and I started asking myself these existential questions like, who am I? What is this world all about? What is life all about? I mean, what is the meaning of all of this? Because I couldn't compute anymore that the meaning of life was moving around a few decimals on a spreadsheet and making my investors more money, and so I couldn't play that game anymore. And ultimately, that led me to sort of this self-realization. And I wrote a book about it, sort of, my Never Enoughitis was my first book. And that's my trajectory in life, sort of up the mountain, then down the mountain, and then how I got myself out of it, and some of the spiritual truths, the universal spiritual truths that I found across all ancient wisdom traditions and all religions, and it's all very similar. And then later I wrote Love+Truth, which is the spiritual manifesto, a fully channeled work. Then came Manifesting Mastery, because I wanted to help people, how can we manifest the life we desire, the experiences we want in life, without selling our soul. And there's some principles that we can apply there. And then earlier this year, I published the Crucible Manifesto, which is sort of an expose of how the world really works and how we can change it. And we do that individually because we can only change ourselves. And then the last book that I just released yesterday is Althuis, and this is specifically written for men because I'm a firm believer that to a large extent the world looks the way it does today, the wars, the violence, the economic degradation, the inequalities, the injustices, the environmental disaster that we're facing. It's mostly because men are the poison, largely. But men are also the medicine. And I truly believe that when we sort of escape just being stuck in our mind and we open up our heart, something very beautiful happens within men. And we start having a bigger picture and we start coming into service to life rather than just extracting from life. And this is what this book is about. It's a field guide for men to sort of step into that paradigm, from the paradigm that we've been living in for hundreds of years or thousands of years, which has really created the world that we see today. And I believe the world is going to change. We're in a transformational process. And then I'll stop talking. And I do this because I have 3 kids, and this is not the world I want them to inherit from me. And I don't want to have to tell them 30 years from now I was too busy doing meaningless things, and have them live in a Mad Max movie. So one of the big motivations I have is that I really want to do whatever I can to share sort of my journey and what I've learned along the way, to create a more beautiful world for all kids, not just my kids, but for all kids. Because I'll close with this indigenous proverb: is we don't inherit the world from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And that proverb touched me very deeply when I read it a few years ago, and that's sort of what motivates me today.
Beautiful. So that's quite a story. Let's
Well,
just start from the very beginning. So,
uh,
life in Amsterdam compared to when you first moved here, life here, was there a big contrast?
well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, Europe is a bit of a different culture, but it's also a Western country and it's very modern. And I would say growing up in Holland was beautiful because at the time it was very safe. It was in, I'm dating myself, but it's the 70s and 80s. I had a lot of freedom as a kid. I grew up in, we had a prosperous household, and my parents worked very hard. They weren't around very much, but, I didn't lack anything materially, and I had a beautiful childhood and upbringing. And Holland is quite liberal. So one of the biggest shocks I had coming to the United States is how Puritan it was. And so this is sort of anchored in some of the religious participation, because in Europe that is much less prevalent. And here it's still pretty strong. And I landed in Atlanta, which has, it's the Bible Belt, right?
Yes.
And I'm not saying anything good or bad about it. It was just that was a bit of a shock to the system, because on the one hand, everything is permissible and possible in America, and on the other hand, there's this Puritan sort of moral code that is also adhered to. And that was very different for me, because Europe at the time I thought was a lot more progressive in many ways. For instance, we in Holland in the 60s and 70s, the whole debate about gay rights and all these things. I mean, that was all like that. It wasn't a big issue. That wasn't a societal issue that we were still grappling with, that nobody cared. They get the same rights, and, they can get married if they want to, and they can have health benefits. And, so when I got here, I was like, well, we're still talking about this. It was sort of a revelation. But I understand the history of it, and I understand where it's coming from. And I appreciated also all the opportunities that were here that weren't available in Europe. Because what I was able to do as a Dutchman landing here, I'm an immigrant, and for me, when I was at GE, I never felt impaired in my career because of my immigrant status, or, I was already a citizen by that time. But just because I had a Dutch history or Dutch lineage, I never felt there was any sort of limitation what I could do in America. If I worked hard and I went by the right ways, then, you can work your way up. Now, I could not have done the same in the European Union going to a German company or a French company. So we talk about like this European Union, but there's still great cultural divides. I could not rise in a German company the way I did in an American company. Nobody in the GE cared where you came from. It was whether or not you were smart and good and you showed up and you did your job exceptionally well. And if you did, you were going to move on, and have a beautiful career. So it comes with pros and cons, and I think it's still the country of opportunity. That's why so many people still come
Exactly. And then for the people who are still struggling with this, you moved up in your company quite quickly, and you said,
here.
you learned to be a shark, you learned to, play the game. Any advice for someone who would like to play the game in advance, but maybe not be so sharky?
Yeah. um,
Is it possible?
of course, it's always possible. Everything's possible. But I was at the highest echelons of business, and there that's a very competitive world. And you need to have a little bit sharp elbows. And I would more advise people, why do you want to go there, right? Because we have this conception that, if I can just get to that level of success and accolades and prestige and status, then I will be happy. And I can promise you, if any of those things, what I call our extrinsic factors, right, it's not going to fill the void you're trying to fill. And so there might be much more fulfillment in actually seeking something you really enjoy doing. When I talk to my kids now, and they're all in their teens, I said, your main job right now as a teenager, of course you got to show up for school and get some grades and all that stuff. But this is the time for you to figure out what your passion is. What do you really love to do? Because what happens in life is there's an intelligence that creates all of us. And if you want to figure out the intrinsic dream, not what the world tells you to do that will make you happy, but the intrinsic dream that you have, because that's what you're here to live. And it doesn't matter what that is. If that's being a master carpenter, go be a master carpenter, and then gain mastery in that, right? Or be a homemaker, or be a CEO, or be a titan, or start a business. It doesn't matter what it is, right? But if you're passionate about it, I can promise you, you're going to have the gifts, talents, and superpowers and access to resources to do it. Now, you might have to go on the journey to get a degree or to gain mastery in whatever you want to do, but it's going to be fun because you're going to want to learn. Because this interests you. This is something that you wake up in the morning and you're excited about. You're following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says. And this is really the magic recipe, what I call success in life, because success is not just making money. I know a lot of people with a lot of money that are miserable people. I also know people that don't have a lot of money and they're very, very happy because prosperity can be measured on many different dimensions. And money is just one of them. And the problem with our society is that we measure all of it in money. But, you know, those things that we can't measure in money are usually the ones that are most meaningful in life. You know, love, fulfillment, meaning, passion, joy, you know, health, all these things. And you can't measure that in money. But that is actually what makes you feel like I'm happy to be alive. You know, I have this beautiful French word, this joie de vivre, which is a state of joy. And you can have this sort of state of joy even when life doesn't go your way. And even when you know, so even through the peaks and valleys, you're not yo-yoing between nines and twos in your life, right? You're sort of more in this steady state that I'm very happy and content, and I'm still going to lose people I love, and I'm still going to have a breakup maybe or a heartbreak, and I'm still going to maybe encounter some financial difficulties, or the economy has a recession, or you know, life happens, right? And that's never going to go away. I don't care how rich you are or how poor you are. But if you can sort of access this joie de vivre, then we can start looking at life in like, you know, it's just we're navigating this labyrinth. You know, we're all just figuring it out as we go. But at least, you know, I can spend the time with the people I love doing things I enjoy that give me meaning and sense of purpose, right? And now we're sort of anchoring in what I feel is a much greater prosperity than money alone could ever get us.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you're perfect for this podcast because that's what we're all about, finding that
Yeah.
joy and that purpose. So thank you.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
number one thing is, you know, what is your intrinsic dream? And I would even go further. And you know, it doesn't matter what we call it, right? We can call it God, Creator, Brahman, in Vedic philosophy, and infinite intelligence, universal mind. You don't even have to believe it. But there is some intelligence that's orchestrating all of that because none of this is like completely random, right? I mean, there is an intelligence woven throughout life. And so we could just sort of accept that as a premise of life, right? And then if we can dial into ourselves, and only you can figure this out, and it's in your heart has a dream. And the only thing you have to make sure is that it's not the dream that the world told you you should have. It's the dream you have. What does your life look like? You know, what is your dream? What do you want to realize? What journey, what odyssey, what adventure do you want to go on in life? And when you can really hone in on that intrinsic dream, right? Now you know where to go. And then, you know, you're going to have to go on this adventure of gaining mastery and resources and honing these talents and superpowers. But it's going to be a joyful journey because, you know, you found where you want to go, what you want to do. And it's not supposed to be here overnight. It actually is not that helpful if it shows up right away because the process of getting there is part of the fulfillment. When something is sort of challenging to get, then when you finally get it, there's a huge joy in that. If it's just given to you, right? It's sort of flat. You know, yeah, you're still happy, but then you're like, you know, you will always walk around like I didn't really earn it. It just fell in my lap. We value the things in life the most that took us some effort and some dedication and some discipline, and we have to work towards it, right? And so don't see the process as a burden. See it as an opportunity to work towards something.
Right. And I want to look at kind of contrast again. So, when you were at the top of the business echelon,
Mhm.
you were working compared to after you had your epiphany and
Mhm.
you started going in this other direction.
Right.
compare, like, how was your relationship with your family and your personal friends while you were working, and then how was it different
Right.
as you came into this new life, if you will?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. You know, I was what they call a quintessential alpha man, right? I'm a very masculine, alpha driven, motivated. And, you know, by the time in 2015, I've been at it for a while. And I sort of, you know, stopped for a moment because I sold my business and suddenly I had time to actually reflect because I never had time. I never allowed myself any time because I was always, I could do more.
Mhm.
And yes, I had, you know, realized a lot of success. So, you know, you should have seen my LinkedIn profile, right? Everybody is applauding you, which is part of actually the difficulty because the whole world is telling you how successful you are and how you're the winner and you won the game.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but if I look behind me, right, I see a trail of debris. I see a trail of carnage, of friendships I didn't nourish. My kids were very young, but I was not very present in their life. My wife at the time felt extraordinarily lonely because I was never around. And when I was around, I was exhausted. And I was already thinking and working up late at night and doing the next spreadsheet or the next business deal or whatever, right? And I thought I was doing the right thing, what I was supposed to do. Um, I wasn't that close with my family because I didn't have time, you know, and it wasn't that I didn't care. It was just everything went by the wayside. I was so monomaniacally focused on this business success and becoming, you know, a player and being seen and getting the accolades and getting the success. And at the end of the day, you know, you look back and you're like, you know, all these people that you know, this was an interesting experience, right? So when I sort of slowed down and I stopped, within 6 months, I sort of lost my relevancy in that world because I wasn't doing deals anymore and I wasn't really, you know, playing the game anymore. And so all these investors that were, you know, we would have lunches and dinner all the time, and I was their best friend. I got invited to parties and you know, and cocktails and fundraisers and all the fancy stuff. But as soon as I sort of slowed down, I lost my relevancy to them. And then you realize, like, these relationships were very transactional.
Mhm.
You know, I needed them because I needed investors and lawyers and accountants and whoever, right? And they needed me because they needed my deals, so they had something to fund. And so those transactional relationships just wither away very quickly. And then you're sort of like, so what is actually really meaningful, right? Well, these kids that barely know me, that's actually really meaningful. This wife that doesn't recognize her husband anymore because he's never around, right? That's actually meaningful. These family members that are concerned about you, that actually love you, that don't really truly care if you're successful or not. They just want you around. Friendships and things like that. And obviously my own health even took a big hit because I didn't have time to work out as much as I wanted to or to eat healthy. I was always eating out in restaurants and things like that. And so I started working on that. And just my mental health, you know, my own sort of health and well-being. It took me a long time to actually figure out how to slow down because I had conditioned myself so much to keep running, to be on this treadmill that when I got off the treadmill, I was almost like an addict that didn't get his dopamine hits, you know. And I started realizing, like, yeah, I wasn't an alcoholic by any means, but I was addicted to, you know, being in the game and, you know, the dopamine hits and winning and closing deals and, you know, talking to important people. And, you know, when all that fell away, there was a big adjustment period I had to go through. That sort of that stimulation fell away.
Mhm. So, as you were just gradually
Mm.
changing over through your process, through your healing, did your kids notice? Did they say anything about it?
Well, yeah, they're very young at the time. But I eventually, you know, my wife and I were not able to sort of sustain the marriage. We tried, but so in 2017 when we got divorced, I did make a very conscious choice that I wanted to be a present father in their life. And as we separated, I had my own house, I had the schedule, now I had the kids. And in the beginning, this is almost tragic to admit, but the first weekends that I had my kids, I had to call their mom and say, well, what do I feed them? What do I buy? Where do I go in the groceries? I had no idea because I never took care of any of that stuff. And, here's this guy that was at the top of the business world. And I would be like stressed out for 2 days when my kids were coming because I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know how to take care of them. I didn't know what to feed them. And I had to learn all these things. Of course, she was very graceful and she helped me and she supported me in that because she did see that I really wanted to be present in their life. And, it's the best choice I ever made, but it came at the expense of saying no to some other things, So I stayed locally. I made sure I lived very close to them. I even off, what's not my schedule. We help each other and support each other a lot. And she has a part-time job, and I do a lot of drop-offs and other things because I wanted to be present in her life. And the kids are beautiful in that they're so pure and so innocent that once you start pouring love and attention into them, they light up like a Christmas tree. And they didn't care I didn't have the dinner figured out. They didn't care that we were eating, whatever. I would go out and buy dinners, because I didn't know how to cook yet for them. I could cook for myself, but they don't care. Kids are so innocent. They just want love and attention. That's really all they care about. And so kids are very quick to respond.
Yeah, and I can imagine, you said growing up, you didn't see your parents much because maybe they
No.
were on the same track. Um, and,
Yeah.
and now they're seeing you and they
Right.
didn't have you. And now that they have you,
Right.
that same
Yeah.
wound could possibly have been perpetuated,
Of course. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
because you made changes
Right.
and you're healing that part of yourself,
Right.
that doesn't have to continue with your kids and they get to have you.
Right. And it's important that we also internalize context. My father was born in Holland in 1940, which was the Nazis just invaded Holland when he was born. He lost his father when he was 3 years old. By the time he was 5 years old, he had Nazi soldiers raiding, through his house. That was his experience. And then the next 10 years, Holland was war ravaged. And so all his formative childhood years, he lived in a country that was trying to rebuild itself. So to him, life was hard because that's all he knew. And so he went on this journey of building his life the best way he knew. And he taught me and my brothers, you know, to survive. And he says, it's not a friendly world out there. You got to go hustle. You got to go make it happen because nobody's here to save you. Nobody, because that was his experience. And it was his real experience. And he was always saving for a rainy day. You never know what's going to happen. And, this tainted his whole outlook on life. And my mom, was born a few years later, but she also grew up in poverty post World War II. And so she was marked by that. And when they got married very young, they sort of had this union between them. Like we're never going to live like our parents. We're going to make sure that we have everything we need and we're going to have a house and we're going to be able to provide for our kids and build a better life than we had growing up. And so they both worked so hard because, they sort of felt like, well, this is what you do to create a better life. They didn't have any other way to do it. So I see that context now. It's not that they didn't want to be home, and it's not that they didn't want to be with us. It was just their survival mechanisms and patterns that they had picked up in their childhood, right? Of course, as a kid, you interpret it like, well, work is more important to me. And it's not that we were abandoned by any means, but they were just always very, very preoccupied with work, with and then that was like sort of an ethos to that. Like it was sort of glorified. We see this a lot today, right? We see a lot of couples and marriages, and materially, they live in the biggest houses and drive the newest cars, and Christmas is like, but it's like at what expense, you know? Are you actually having quality time? How's your health? You know, are you actually slowing down to smell the roses, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson says, many wander through the meadows, very few smell the flowers. And I think here in the United States, especially, but in Europe as well, um, you know, we sort of have gotten habituated, right? That somehow the things we purchase are going to make us happy.
Mhm.
And now we have a explosion in the last 20 years in self-storage facilities. And people have so much stuff, they can't even put it in their garage anymore. And so they rent extra space to put all the stuff they never look at, they never use, but they work their ass off to get that. So they
Mhm.
exchanged, you know, the most valuable commodity we have, time, for money to have stuff that doesn't really add that much value to your life. I mean, it's been proven that sort of beyond the basics, right? If you have a good car and a nice roof over your head, and you sort of have the basics, you know, food, you don't have to worry about your debit card bouncing at the grocery store, and you can buy the food that you need, and you sort of have like a comfortable life. The the incremental joy you get from having more is very, very minimal. And so from that point onwards, really you start looking like, do I really want to exchange my time? Because that's my most precious commodity. That's what I can't get back.
Mhm.
You know, do I really want to spend 80 hours in the office and miss the Pee Wee game with my kid? You know, do I not want to slow down in the weekend and be working? Do we both want to work? Is it really necessary? What do we gain for this? A lot of times when we just downsize and sort of simplify our life, it actually becomes much happier.
Yeah, it's so true. And so as you got to know your kids, you learned to cook and learned what they liked.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
are some of the things that you experienced with them, activities you did, or some favorite things y'all love to do that you would have missed if you kept on going in the same direction you were going?
I think the dearest thing is that to talk to me, and your kids coming to you to talk and wanting to spend time with you, right? Even though now they're in their teens, so they got all the normal teenager stuff going on too, but um, they only do that if you built that in their younger years, that they knew that if they come to you, that you are available. Now you can't be available 24/7. There's just certain things you need to do. Um, but them knowing that you're available and that you're interested and that you want to talk to them and you want to spend time with them, and you invite them for that, right? I think that's the most rewarding thing, because kids are very simple. If they don't think you're available, they think they're a burden, right? And every time they ask, right, you always say, no, I'm too busy. I got to do this. I got to do that. You know, they stop asking, and they're going to go find that somewhere else, which might be their iPad or it might be whatever. Um, so I think that is probably the most rewarding thing, that I love hanging out with my kids. You know, I think it's fun. We have a good time, and you know, it's not, you know, I'm not making it like a Disney movie, but because they're still teenagers, you know, they still go out. My oldest son drives now, so you know, I almost got to make an appointment with him. But he does respond to it, right? He does come, he does realize that I really do want to see him and hang out with him. And, you know, we work out together, and we do, you know, I have some activities that each of them I know they like, and we do that together. Um, which is, you know, it's incredibly rewarding. And, you know, for me, the oldest one is 17. He's got one more year to go in school, and then he's off to college, right? And so it goes really quick as well.
So let's talk about this new book that just came out,
Yesterday, yeah,
The
Alpha
Grill for
Virtus.
Men. Tell us about it. What's in it?
Yeah, so let me preface it, because there's a couple of themes that I sort of picked up on. I mean, one of the themes is that, you know, masculinity has almost become a dirty word, right? There's a lot of things about the patriarchy and the this and the that, and yes, there's a lot of wounded masculinity out there, and let me quantify that, you know, Male, female are genders, masculine and feminine, and we're talking about energies. I'm talking about principles, right? And so men tend to embody the masculine, but mostly, right? They're the embodied fractal of the masculine, but they also have feminine energies. We all have both. It's the yin yang model, right? We're both an amalgamation of both. But women are predominantly feminine energy, but they also have masculine energy, and men are predominantly masculine energy. And so I saw a lot of this sort of, men are toxic and you have to emasculate them and all that stuff. And I don't think that that's the way to go. I think that's the pendulum swinging too far. I do think we have to own what the wounded masculine has created in the world, right? And that's coming from wounding. It's coming from bad programming. It's coming from this world telling you as a man that, unless you have X amount of dollars in your bank, you're worthless. And so, this is sort of this mindless pursuit of all these things. And this is what I call homo economicus. This is a man that's just lost in the game of extraction and this outside game. And the real beauty, I believe, of men is actually the inner beauty, virtues. And, when you meet a virtuous man, a man that truly has a spine, that has character, that has wisdom, that has love and compassion, and he expresses that into life, has valor and chivalry and fortitude. I mean, these are qualities that you have. This is not money in your bank account, but that is actually what makes a beautiful man, a really profound man. And a presence of such a man in either a family or a circle of friends or in a business has a profound catalytic effect, right? Because we've all been touched by someone that embodied that. And if you've ever wronged a man, right, and he had the compassion to be merciful and forgiving, you will never forget that. When he had the power to annihilate you, but he didn't. He chose to forgive. He chose to be merciful, right? And this comes from what I call the depth of a man. So this is getting into the depth, the substance of masculinity. And this is the archetype. This is the true masculine archetype, not the hollowed out version that we see and not the alpha male pop culture idea that we have. But this is actually the cultivating these depths inside. And it doesn't matter where you are in life as a man. We all have a circle of influence. And I call that this is your benevolent kingdom. And your circle might be very small, just your family, or just very, or it might be very large. Maybe you are a huge titan, or you're famous, or whatever, right? So your influence might be large, it might be small, but it doesn't matter. Your circle of influence as a man, right? Your responsibility is to beautify and empower everything in that circle. That's your job. Not to beautify yourself, not to elevate yourself, but to elevate everything in your circle of influence. Now, when you do that, you automatically elevate yourself. Because as a man, our job is to be in service to the whole, not in service to ourselves. Boys are in service to themselves, right? And so what we have in the world is a lot of men, a lot of boys disguised in man's bodies. When we look at pop culture, we look at most of our politicians, we look at most of our high-level CEOs and the people that we tend to idolize because of their material success, what we're really seeing is immaturity, right? There's no depth there. They're just, lost in a game of greed and popularity and all these sort of shallow things. There's no depth to it. And this is why the world looks the way it does. And we don't have to be the president of the United States. We have our own benevolent kingdom, our own little circle. It's our family, it's our friends, it's the people we touch, maybe the business we work in, our colleagues, maybe the community, maybe our church that we're part of, or whatever it might be, right? So wherever we show up, our job is to make it better, more beautiful, more just, more loving, more compassionate. And we have the power as men to do that. This is the beauty, right? But we have to cultivate this. We have to master this. We have to rise above our lower nature. So this is what Alpha Virtus is about. It's a field guide for men to actually, get into the depth of what it really means to be a man. to really be in service to the world.
That sounds beautiful because, hearing that as a woman is like, who wouldn't be willing to work alongside someone like that?
Yeah, yeah,
As
and
opposed to someone who's being childish.
yeah, no, for sure, and one thing that is part of this, I talk a lot about in this book. I position it like masculinity is actually the medicine, and we're largely the poison today, right? And there's been a sacrilege of the feminine, of which women are the embodied fractal. But this sacrilege, the feminine is all of creation. Mother Earth is feminine. It's Mother Earth. It's not Father Earth, right? And what are we doing to Mother Earth, right? And every business is feminine in nature because it's part of creation. So the feminine births and the feminine sustains life. Now look in the world today, and what are we doing with businesses, with Mother Earth, with societies, politically, all these different things? Because all of creation, all of the physical world, all of existence is feminine in nature. And there's been a sacrilege of that. Because do we consider these things holy? And we should, because it's all sacred. All life is sacred. All creation is sacred, right? And, rising as a man, ascending sort of in this, we are here to protect. We are here to be stewards of life, not to dominate life, right? This is the most, this is maybe the grossest translation error ever. Where in the Bible it says, and man was given dominion. No, we were given stewardship. Now, if you're a steward of something, you take care of it, you cherish it, you devote your life to it, you're in service to it. Now, are we in service to our women, our girls, and our boys? Are we in service to society? Are we in service to the greatest good of all? Do we see the humanity in the homeless person that's fallen on hard times? We now have homeless camps in the United States, one of the richest countries in the world, that equal everything I saw in the shanty towns in Bogota, Colombia. We have lawless zones in LA and San Francisco where you have hundreds of thousands of people in tents and camps, right? This is lawless. The police doesn't even go in because they won't get out. And we're okay with that? As a society, as a community, as like, I mean, these are people too. And then, it's not just Americans. I mean, like, look around the world. Are we okay with 1 billion people in this world that don't have anything to eat when the whole world produces 1.5 times more food than we can consume? Right? It's a distribution problem, but we have to care. We can't just say like, well, I want a new BMW next month, so it's not really my problem. Yeah, it is your problem because we're all connected. We're all part of the same fabric. It's all divinity expressed in the form. And until we sort of see that connection that everybody else is me.
Right.
Now, we don't individually have to solve all the world's problems, but we can solve our own little world, right? This is where we can show up and we can work on ourselves. So how can I be in service to something that's bigger than me? And as a man, if you want to feel purpose and meaning in your life, like a really sincere, and I'm not talking about knowing all the statistics of the third baseman of the New York Yankees, right? I'm not talking about sports voyeurism and spending 9 hours on a Sunday watching, 17 football games. I'm talking about being in service to life, being in service to something greater than you. Now, if you want to have deep purpose and meaning, you want to wake up in the morning and know that your life matters, which is something that we all crave as men. We want to know that we matter. Then you have to start living that life to be in service.
Just wonderful. I'm in awe just listening. And even if we could take little bits of that and get started.
Well, it's not a very
Men with
popular opinion
women
these
too.
days. Yeah, no, of course, but there's a beautiful thing, and I explain this because I like women, I'm not comparing them with children, but women in a way, they have a sacred fuel source, right? And the sacred fuel source of a woman is love. And when you pour love and devotion into a woman, she lights up like a Christmas tree.
Mm.
It's just the way she's wired.
Mm.
She's wired to love. Her nature is not to be bitter. Her nature is to be joy. And so when she's bitter and when she's overworked and when she's stressed out and when she doesn't feel seen and she doesn't feel heard and she doesn't feel loved, guess what? She goes barren, literally. Like, the life is just sucked out of her. And so you as a man, if you're in a relationship and you pretend to love her, if you view or you see that in your wife or your girlfriend or whatever it is, right? Your number one job is to start pouring more love in her, to actually be in the service to her. And it will take maybe just a little bit because she's not used to it. But guess what? You do that consistently, she can't help but light up like a Christmas tree. She can't help but want to love you back. She can't help but respect you. All the things you want from her, that you crave from her, you have to go first. It's just the way it works in nature. The masculine goes first. We open our heart first. She can only open up to what she's given. And then she'll multiply it 10 times, by the way. That's her magic power. That's her magic pixie dust. Everything you give her, she multiplies 10 times. You give her a house, she makes it a home. Right?
Yeah, that's
Now,
beautiful.
now women are just one fractal of the feminine. Look at Mother Earth. Look at nature. What happens when you put love and care and devotion into nature? An explosion of love. Right? We know this from regenerative agriculture. We know this from replanting forests. We know this, when we stop polluting, extracting, and killing her, poisoning her, she rebounds. Like there's been studies done that in 18 months, she can recover from almost the worst atrocities committed to Mother Earth, right? She's feminine too. Now, when you have a business, which is feminine in nature, what happens when you start pouring love and devotion and attention into a business? It starts to flourish. When you put love, attention, and devotion into employees, they start to rise. Suddenly they want to be there. They do a better job. They're excited to be there. They're starting to learn and grow and evolve, and they're starting to pull their weight behind the business. Everything you as a man, but a woman as well, of course, but as a man, everything you touch that you pour love and devotion and service into, it will come alive. It will flower. It will blossom. Right? It's just the nature. Love is the magical pixie dust. And we as men, we have big hearts, but we're so closed off. We're so stoic about it. We're so in our head. Not everything is logical. Actually, the greater part of this universe, they call the physical realm, right? Earth, they call that the ordinary world. And that's because the spiritual realm is the extraordinary world. And we have access to that world too. And in the extraordinary world, things are non-linear. You can't compute it with your mind. But this is where all the beautiful serendipities come from, all the little lucky breaks, all the coincidences. Now, how do we create those? By pouring love, devotion, and service into those things in everything, really. And magic happens. And we will never fully understand how that all comes together. We don't need to. All we need to know is that we need to put love, attention, care, protection, safety, dignity as a society. This is the biggest problem we have, right? Can we just honor other people even when they don't agree with us, right? Can we just honor their dignity even when we don't agree with their political views, we don't agree with some of their stances? I bet you if you have a political adversary and you pour love and respect and dignity into that person, I bet you you're going to find out that on 90% of things, you totally agree. So there's 10%, you have a different view. It's okay. We don't all have to be the same. The part of nature is like, all of nature is unique, right? Diversity actually, it strengthens life. The entire evolutionary process is an explosion of diversity on this planet and everywhere in the cosmos. And here we are trying to like, make everybody fit the same box. That's not the part of the puzzle. The mosaic of humanity is all unique puzzle pieces, all coming together, because that's what makes the puzzle. If you buy a puzzle and it's cut into squares, right? How much fun is that puzzle to do? Nobody would buy
Yeah,
that puzzle.
that's so true. Well, Robert, I think that people would love to connect with you. Where can they connect with you?
I have a website with my name, my strange name, right? My Dutch name, robertalthuis.com. I'm on Instagram at Robert Althuis, on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find me everywhere. My books are all on Amazon. I got 5 books out now. There's something for everybody, I think. So whatever speaks most to you. And yeah, I'm happy if my books are of any value to anybody. That's wonderful. Let me know if it meant anything to you, because that's really the most beautiful thing you can get as an offer. Some feedback that what you committed to paper was meaningful for someone else.
So now I have a personal question.
Please.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Every time I rise above my own lower nature, because it never leaves you. Every day it's mastery, right? And so in every moment we have a choice. And we can come from a reaction, which is usually patterns, or we can make a conscious choice. And every time I'm able to make a conscious choice, I'm very grateful that I was able to walk this path. And it wasn't always easy, because I was not I was applauded by the world, but I wasn't, I knew what I was, right? I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I was so disgusted with myself, what I had become. And now to look myself in the mirror and even see my flaws and imperfections and say, you're a good guy. Not perfect, still make mistakes. You still got a couple of rough edges, still got work to do. But you're fundamentally you're a good person. To be able to see that in myself, self-love is the hardest thing to master in life. Because we always are huge critics of ourselves. We always think we're not enough. We're not this enough, not that enough, not beautiful enough. No, I don't have the right body, the right this, the right. And to learn to love yourself is the real journey in life, because hurt people. And if you're chastising yourself all the time, you're inevitably going to be a hurt person. And so this hurt, this pain is going to be expressed into the world. Now, if you can bring yourself to self-love, right? Own your mistakes and own your edges and own your flaws, but not chastise yourself for it, because you're here to be human, to be imperfect, right? Now, if you can do that, if there's love inside of you, you're not going to go out in the world and intentionally cause harm and hurt, because you don't want to share that joy and that love. And so this is the biggest work we can do. The more love we can cultivate in ourselves, right? And accept ourselves for our own flaws, the more compassion we have for someone else having a flaw or making a mistake. And yeah, you're going to get wronged by some people, and some people are going to lie to you, and some people will steal from you and all that. But if you can approach that and say, well, oh man, they must be having a really difficult time, right? Compassion is one of those powerful things we can have, including for ourselves. Right?
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for
Thank
all
you.
your wisdom. And I do have one more question.
Please.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I'm going to do that with a quote by Joseph Campbell, who was a beautiful mythologist and he was a profound man. And he says, life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Follow your bliss.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you.